Very good morning, students. Yesterday we have discussed little Franz. He was very much afraid to go to his school because he didn't learn the lessons of participles. But when he reached at the school, he has noticed there is a big change. All the distinguished people are there in the back side of the class, such as the postmaster, the former mayor, the houses, and everybody was very sad. When Mr. Hamel he started to speak, he said, "Today is the last day of your French lesson. The French language will not be taught anymore in the district of Alsace and Lorraine. Instead of the French, you will have the German language. The German teacher will come tomorrow." Even though little Franz was thinking the French and the French notebooks and history of the saints were a nuisance for him, but now he started to think, now I am going to miss my dearest teacher. Even though he was very rude, when little Franz came to know this is the last day of my teacher, he felt very sorry for him. That's what I said, the dearest teacher, even though he was very rude. While little Franz was thinking all about these changes which is going to happen in the school, his turn came for answering the questions of participants. But he couldn't able to answer. In his mind, everything was mixed up. He expected a scolding from Mr. Hamel, but he said very polite way, "Little Franz, I'm not going to scold you this time." It means usually the little boy he used to get this scolding. He said, "This is not only your mistake. We were thinking that every day we are postponing the lessons. We have enough time to learn. Tomorrow we will learn." So the final day has taken place. And this is not only your mistake, your parents, even me, we all were having equal responsibility for this. Now, dear students, we'll read further. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. And I have been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday? Then, from one thing to another, young Hamel went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, I think, that I had never listened so carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before his going away. and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. Dear students, here we can see M. Hamel. He continued to say, your parents were not anxious enough to have have you learn. They prefer to put you to work on a farm or the mills. See, it's not only your mistake. Even your parents, they sent you for working and earning someone. Dear students, here we have to understand the situation after the war. The economy in the country was perished. The parents they compelled to send their beloved children for work. And he continued to say, this is not only, I don't blame only your parents. Even from my side, I made a lot of mistakes. Many times, when I want to give water to my flowers in the garden, many times I send you for that instead of teaching. And when I want to go for fishing, I have given you holidays. So it's not only your mistake, little friends. Then he continued to talk about the French language. He said, French is a language which is the most logical one and the most beautiful language. You never forget. I may go tomorrow and I supposed to go because of the government order. I'm leaving. But you remember one thing, don't forget it. Then he started teaching the lesson. This time, little Franz, he felt that the teacher is explaining everything with lot of patience, and I understand it very clearly. This is the first time that I felt. We have seen, according to little Franz, it was a nuisance. The French language and the history of saints, the notebooks, textbooks, everything was a nuisance for him. But this time, he understood everything very well. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Hamel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand. France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flag floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone sat to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest one, who walked right on the tracing their fish hooks, as if that was French too. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German? Even the pigeons? Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy. For 40 years, he had been there in the same place, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. Just like that, just like that. Only the decks and the benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop-vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country the next day. Here, dear students, we can see little Franz. He was thinking, how difficult for this change. This poor man, Mr. Hamel, how he can leave everything. The last 40 years he was here in this school. And what are the changes happened during that time? There was no much change. Only the desks and benches had been drawn smooth. The walnut tree in the garden were taller, which Mr. Hamel planted. And the hoopvine that he planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How can this poor person leave everything in a single day, and how can he move? Little Franz, he was thinking all these things. We can see it is very difficult for a person. Sudden in a morning, if someone wants to leave everything and he is compelling to move from his place that he was believing from that place to another place, is a very difficult situation. And little Franz, he was thinking, how my dear teacher can manage all these things. And he heard the sound. Hamel's sister, he was preparing his trunk, his luggages, because they have to leave the place early in the morning. The very next day they have to leave the place. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, baby, boo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion. And it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember it, that last lesson. All at once, the church clock struck 12. Then the Angelus. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Persian returns from drill sounded under our windows. Hamel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friends, he said. I, but something choked him. He could not go on. Then he returned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and, bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Viva la France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. Dear students, here we can see the end of the story. When the bell rang at 12, little Franz, he heard the returning sound of the Persian soldiers. Mr. Hamel, he stood. And this is the first time the little Franz, he noticed how tall my teacher is. Everybody was, everybody were in a very sad mood. And still I was remembering how easily I remembered this lesson which he taught. Mr. Hamill, he has taken a piece of chalk and he started to write on the blackboard. What did he write? Viva la France means goodbye, France. Now he is going to leave the country and he bent his head and he said to the students, dear students, the school is over. It is dismissed. You may go now. Here the story ends. Now we'll just discuss the two important questions, understanding the text. The people in the story suddenly realize how precious their language is to them. What shows you this? Why does this happen? See, there are two questions. The first question is the people in the story suddenly realize how precious their language is to them. What shows you this? Here we can see Mr. Hamill, he said, always we used to say, we will learn it tomorrow. And little Franz, very hardly he know how to write and how to speak his mother tongue. Why does it happen? Mr. Hamill says that this is not because of your mistake only. We, means the parents, and as a teacher, me, we all are having equal responsibilities for this. I have utilized you. I sent you many times for my work. And for my personal gainings, I have given you holiday. When I felt that I want to go for a fishing, I have given you holiday. And your parents, even though they were compelled, they sent you to work. When we move to the second question, Franz thinks, will they make them sing in German? Even the pigeons, what could this mean? We have seen while reading in the story. I think I didn't make an explanation to that. When Mr. Hamill, he was teaching, the classroom was under a pin drop silence. Only the sound of the scratching of pens and pencils and little some pigeons were there. They flew away from there. So at that time, little Franz, he was thinking, what about this animal? Because our mother tongue has been forcefully taken from us. It is forcefully taken through a government order. So what about these animals and pigeons? Whether they will be compelled to sing or communicate even in the German language? See, no wonder that the little Franz, he thinks in this way because he is a young boy, very young boy. Here we can understand the after effect of a war, the Franco-German war. France was defeated, so their mother tongue, and mother tongue is considered as mother. It has been very forcefully taken. So, dear students, the rest of the questions we'll discuss in tomorrow's assignments.